figured I'd sip on a very delicious non-alcoholic drink in honor of the video's theme, which is all about sobriety, sober curiosity, and just basically a holistic conversation about alcohol through the lens of spirituality, wellness, and just the wisdom that we talk about on this channel. There are just a few things that I want to say to set us up, because I know this topic can be kind of sensitive, kind of controversial in some ways. So first and foremost, I want to say number one, my goal is never to shame anyone. I'm not saying that one thing is like a higher thing than the other, although I'm gonna make a lot of comments about why I believe the sober curiosity life has led me to more happiness. Again, I'm not here to preach and tell you what to do. You make that decision. At the same time, I'm just gonna be honest. I'm gonna tell it like it is. I'm gonna share the information I have. And as such, I'm dividing the video into essentially 3 parts to help us have a very holistic conversation about drinking, alcohol, sobriety, all the things. Number one, I'm basically just gonna go through some very basic facts about drinking, about alcohol use, and what the latest studies have showed us, so we can just set aside where I'm operating from in terms of the health conversation around drinking. Number two, to just basically give us the overview of what the usual thing is, right? What's the modus operandi on drinking? What's our general culture, and what am I referencing in general? And then the third part is to basically provide a new perspective and to make the argument that I believe the sober life can turn on a 6th sense, can really just light up the way that you experience life. And that's the main takeaway from the video, is to just explain my experience and why I believe that it is truly a gift to go through life as it is. And then as a small additional part, there I did receive a few answers in a question box on Instagram, which I will respond to in more depth because people brought up some really interesting perspectives, so I want to share those. As I go through the video, please feel free to comment your perspective. I would love to hear more about your story, your opinion, any insights that you have on this topic. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a like, share it with a friend, and subscribe. Wow, I just got like a second wind of excitement for this conversation, because what I want to say first and foremost as like an opening thoughts, okay? This is a very evolving conversation. I don't think that there's a one-size-fits-all way of life, of spirituality, or of attaining what you want to attain in life. Everyone's path is different, and I have immense respect for that. The point is, this is my perspective now, and it could totally change. Like, who knows years down the line where I'll be in my mind and just my perspective. Again, I want to show love and respect for people on their paths. I have plenty of family and friends who seem happy and fulfilled with alcohol present in their lives. So this is just what I believe to be true about life and based on my experience. Now that all the fun disclaimers out of the way, really what I want to dive into first is to just establish the background information on what does alcohol do to our body, right? I think the consensus now, this is based on the most recent study that came out in summer of 2022, is that, to be a bit dramatic, alcohol is basically poison to the body. It is not good for your cells. It contributes to brain and neurodegeneration. It affects your gut health. It affects all sorts of physiological things that really are not serving you being a healthy person. I'm gonna link all of the studies and things that I'm mentioning and where I'm getting this information from, so you can look into them by yourself. But I mention these because I just want to set aside that my perspective and my entrance into this conversation is based on the belief, which comes from a mix of data and a mix of my own experience, that I really don't view alcohol as a healthy thing to be consuming. And now this is what the latest studies are showing, is that even low levels of consumption contribute to all of these different harms. There's a really fantastic episode from Andrew Huberman on Huberman Lab where he talks about the most recent study and his understanding and all of the research that he has read about alcohol and its effect on the body. So the way that he explains it, I think, is the best. And so if you're wondering what is my understanding, what's my perspective on the health aspect, in so many words, alcohol is not good for the body, it's not good for the mind, it doesn't help you to reduce stress, it actually makes you more stressed out, when you're not drinking, right? People think that it's a stress reliever, but what happens is that their cortisol levels are higher when they're not drinking. So that's a very brief way of just stating the health situation of drinking and what I'm going to argue. Now, I've had other people argue that they know people who have lived like 103 and they had a shot of pear brandy every single morning and that was healthy for them. Great. I'm happy for that person and that is fine. From my perspective, from my experience, it's very difficult, I think, to tell the average person that drinking low to moderate and then especially not moderate to high amounts is going to be a healthy outcome for them. I just don't buy that. Moving into basically the general modus operandi, if you will, of the West and what I grew up experiencing is that alcohol is just like duh, right? Everyone drinks. That's the basic assumption. People offer you a drink at a party, and if you're the one who says, I'm not drinking, then someone thinks that there's something wrong with you. There's like this famous Chris Williamson quote where he's like, alcohol is the only drug where if you say you're not doing it, people think that you have a problem, which to me is just the epitome of the depth of conditioning and normality and tradition even around drinking in the West. I think that's a really important thing to talk about because it has been the cause of essentially normalizing something that now we're finding out is maybe not so good for us. People will say things like everything in moderation, and again, I don't think that is true anymore because the dose really makes the poison, right? It's the accumulation over time, and aside from that, if we just think about what it is doing to us, right? This is where I'll bring in the sort of spiritual aspect of it, the more holistic approach that's not just data driven. That's what I'm really interested in, is why as a culture do we assume that fun is only to be had when alcohol is present, right? People will say it makes things more fun, it makes us do wild things, but the common denominator in the fun in these scenarios is you and me. It is not some other entity coming in. While I do think that there's a possibility that alcohol has a kind of dark negative energy tied to it, more practically, you are the one having fun. Like, you are the one capable of creating those experiences. And that's why with the theme of this channel, for me, it's really interesting to talk about drinking in the context of becoming your true self, right? When we have this vision of our highest self, who has what we really want, who has fun, who enjoys life, who is awakened and enlightened, that person is you at your core, is your essential self. That person does not need an external thing to make it feel better. That external thing in this conversation is the booze, is the alcohol. So that's why in my personal spiritual experience and my experience just as a human being on her path is that the longer I've gone without drinking, and for context, it's now been, I think, 3-ish months for me, which I think the longest I've gone is about 4 or so months. But the longer and the further I am into a sober stint, if you will, the more I feel like I have awakened new senses. I almost feel like I gain a 6th sense for life, for experiencing life and learning and being present. The ability to be present and fully absorb what is in front of me has completely skyrocketed in relation to alcohol being gone from my life. That is the personal experience that I've also heard is true for other people, right? My friend, and I'll read some of these later on, just said that, this is my friend who's been sober for I think 15 months, said life is magical / difficult / awe-inspiring enough without it. And to me, that's like one of the biggest points, is to plant the seed in your mind in this conversation that tries to get us to think about what is possible for us without this being in the picture, and why do we feel like we need to do something that has such a big cost to our health and well-being in order to have fun, in order to live life to the fullest, right? People will say, have a little fun here and there. Why is fun tied to the booze? I think there's a deeper wound here that people feel trapped, they feel caged and incapable of having fun as they are. That is the more interesting piece of the conversation to me. So to summarize what I've said so far, essentially the key points here are that one, alcohol is basically poison for the body. Yes, maybe there are people who figure out a way for it to not impact them that way. There's things you can do to mitigate against it. But for most people, it's degenerating your brain. It's decreasing the amount of gray matter in your mind, in your brain. It's not good for the gut. And if we expand outside from the spiritual sense, that numbing, the myopic effect, is cutting your connection to source. If you suddenly have a tunnel vision on some things, you're not getting the full experience. This is where I'll read this wonderful excerpt from a book, which I think the book is called Talking to Strangers. I'll put it on the screen, of the myopia theory around alcohol. Thank you to Erica for sending me this. The myopia theory was first suggested by psychologists Claude Steele and Robert Josephs. And what they meant by myopia is that alcohol's principal effect is to narrow our emotional and mental fields of vision. It creates, in their words, a state of short-sightedness in which superficially understood, immediate aspects of experience have a disproportionate influence on behavior and emotion. Alcohol makes the thing in the foreground more salient and the thing in the background less significant. It makes short-term considerations loom large and more cognitively demanding long-term considerations fade away. Here's an example. Lots of people drink when they are feeling down because they think it will chase their troubles away. That's inhibition thinking. Alcohol will unlock my good mood. That's plainly not what happens. Sometimes alcohol cheers you up, but at other times, when an anxious person drinks, they just get more anxious. So the point is, it is changing the way that you sense the world. And that's why people love to do it after work, why it's a stress response, because we think in that immediate moment, this is something that Huberman talks about in his podcast, that it's making us less stressed, but that's not actually scientifically true. Again, broadening this out to what this means as a spiritual being, right? What does this mean for us as spiritual creatures, for us on this path of trying to figure out what is true? How do we move about this life in a fulfilled way? So the second summary point being that the person who's having the fun, the person who's living the dream life, that's you. That's a capability that you have. And I find it sad to think that we've taught people that the only way to have fun, the only way to be cool, the only way to enjoy life is to drink something that is not actually helping you physiologically. We are accepting a major drawback, a major harm for the potential of fun. And again, this is where the conversation around how are we experiencing life? What is the recipe for being able to be fully present and to experience the depth and breadth of life itself, right? My friend Seb says, life is literally a trip in and of itself. And I could not agree more. My journey in being sober has been the most profound up and down trip that I could ever imagine. And because of that, the happiness I feel, the joy, the profundity of my day-to-day existence feels like something I could not have achieved and did not achieve when I was drinking, right? Because it is numbing down those senses. So the other major point that I want to bring up is essentially that the question to me is no longer, is alcohol fun? Do people have fun drinking? To me, it's obvious. People are having fun, they're doing crazy things, they feel free finally, right? But the truth is, I think that those are all illusions. I think that those are cages that people have created in their own minds. The fact that some people only feel like they can dance in front of others when there's alcohol in the picture is very, very clearly a root cause issue of the inability to enjoy life as you really are. It is basically a denial of what reality is. The fact that most people are incapable of that present moment, are incapable of sitting as they are and feeling whole and complete as is, that to me is the root cause. Yes, alcohol is fun. I for sure can imagine that drinking out on the town, because I've done that, is fun. I really don't argue that, and I get that. I guess my argument is becoming more about saying that sober life can be just as fun and potentially a lot more colorful. It is like adding a new set of tones to your whole life. The color palette, the way that you see life suddenly gets an upgrade. Your ability to sense things, your sixth sense, your connection to your intuition, to me is something that is elevated much more by being in a natural state. I talk a lot about not outsourcing your happiness, not outsourcing your intuition to other things. The person in charge of everything here, the common denominator, is you, as you are. And I feel that the exploration from sober curiosity, from spending time sober, is essentially you being willing to look into the mirror, to look at reality as it is, and to say that this is enough, to say that you are enough, to have the self-love, the confidence, the willingness to embrace life as it is. And to me, that's really what this whole thing is. A lot of what I talk about on this channel and what I share on social media is trying to expand our mindset and see how we can realize awakening is just now. Like, it's just exhaling into this moment. Really, it's not even about to drink or not to drink. It's about what's your relationship to yourself? What's your relationship to reality? What's your relationship to everything around you? And can you feel the truth of the universe, the truth of oneness? Can you feel that you're whole as is without the help of anything, basically, right? Just being you, just being the true, essential nature that you are. And sobriety to me is a very beautiful path to achieve that. I think it can be a really beautiful experience for someone that has been numbing and has been turning to other sources to feel anything, to feel something, to feel alive. And what if you can feel all of those things without booze? That's really all it is, right? It's just exploring and being curious about how you interact with life. And so I can tell you from my personal experience, the level of joy and the ability to feel life has skyrocketed through the experience of sobriety, through the experience of sober curiosity. The conversation is really not about whether drinking is fun. I think that's clear. Sure, it's fun. Great, whoop-de-doo. A lot of things are fun in life. Can't you find it within yourself? And how empowering, how freeing would it be to know that you were the captain of your experience? How empowering would it be to know that you are capable of creating whatever emotion, whatever reality that you want? I think that is really, really powerful. Okay, now I want to read a couple of the responses from the Instagram question box just to bring in some of you guys and add a couple points here. Again, one of the points was it makes life more fun, so many great conversations and wild decisions. Again, I really think that that is just about our perception that the alcohol is the thing making us fun, when really it's you are the common denominator. Like, yes, something physiologically is happening to you. We know that for sure. That's why it makes you feel like loosey-goosey and fun. But the point is, you're capable of creating that. End of story. You of course can create that, and then you'll remember it better. Like, the funniest thing to me is people will say, you know, I want to make memories. But the thing is, when people black out, what happens is the activity of neurons in the hippocampus completely shuts off, and that's the area where memories are made. So it's just ironic because we think it makes us memories, but we can't even remember them. So what if you had fun and then actually got to remember it the next day and didn't feel like shit? Someone said, I naturally repel from it when I'm in higher states of consciousness or a higher vibe. I love that, and I think that's interesting too, because what we perceive as being in a higher vibration, I think that depends on the person. Some people would say that they feel like they're in a higher vibe when they do drink, but maybe if you spent 4 months sober, you would just have a new level of data of your own experiences to see that when you are being more conscious, more aware, that you don't want it anymore. As I've grown older, consuming makes less sense to me aside from social/special occasions. Agreed, same. I think I can see the whole special occasion thing, but again, that's another opportunity to see it as like this kind of construct that we've created that says for something to be special, there has to be alcohol involved, and the point is to just recognize that that's just a convention that we made up. I'll still have a huge bender at some point, but 15 months total feels good. Honestly, agree. I think that's great. You know, I don't think, even for me, that I would say I would swear it off completely. I think some people who suffer from alcoholism probably do need to make that decision. But for me personally, I've never had, you know, an immense issue with it in terms of addiction, so props for that. I also think I should note, for whatever reason, that I have not done a full-on psychedelic journey yet. I would like to, and I have plans to, but I haven't yet, and I do think that that will change my perspective a little bit on the role of substances in our life. But I would say that I think plants and plant medicine is a bit of a different category than alcohol. Just a quick note on that. And then Nicole, the homie, shout out to Nicole, shared, it's honestly not even something I think about. I can drink a mocktail, live out, and enjoy myself. That's the other thing. I honestly don't even think of drinking normally unless I'm experiencing like peer pressure from people, which tends to happen, but you know, whatever, I just brush it off at this point and I just tell people like I don't drink, and that tends to silence the pressure. But yeah, I think it's to the point where after a while it's not even something that you think about, like it just doesn't make sense. Like I just, you know, the weekend rolls around and I don't even have the idea of having a drink. And then she also said, without judgment, I often find most people drink because they're unable to be free with themselves. That's it for the discussion today. Make sure you leave your comments, tell me what you think. I'm really open to all perspectives. I have people very close to me who make great arguments for why alcohol has a place in their lives. Would love to hear it. Let me know what you think. And if you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, maybe send it to a friend. And of course, subscribe for more weekly wisdom. I am Bella Solanot. Thank you for being here, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day.